Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of WWT Experts. My name is Matthew Coble. I'll be your host as usual. And today we'll be talking with WWT expert Mike Rice about wireless location services. Mike has been with Worldwide Technology since 2004, so he's been with us for 20 years now. And earlier in his time with us, he worked within our professional services organization as a wireless domain architect. Currently, Mike is working with our global solutions and architecture team as a technical solutions architect. And of course, he specializes in wireless location servers across lots of different technologies, lots of partners, lots of clients. He's based in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm delighted to have him join us today. So Mike, welcome. We're glad to have you. Thanks for joining.
Well, great. Thank you, Matt. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, let's jump right in. So, just to start, let's level set for our audience. And what do we mean when we refer to wireless location services?
Matt, wireless location services at a really high level is really just the ability to be able to track assets through a given space and collect information and data about it. You're really going to hear, when we're talking location, you'll hear the term RTLS or real-time location services. Real-time is not necessarily, always the case here, right? So, I think the main thing we need to talk about when we talk about location services, the ability to track assets, as well as the ability to track people. So think of people as an asset as well. I think one of the things that people kind of miss is that RTLS is not a SKU, it's not a product, it's an ecosystem. So when we talk ecosystems, there's things that are in that ecosystem that really lend to the term systems or solutions. There's lots of different wireless spectrums. It's not just 802.11. There's BLE and there's Zigbee and there's all these other wireless spectrums, even private wireless. Then we have different software, we have different hardware, we have beacons, we have tags. And then, the biggest thing, right, that makes these location services work is really the data and the analytics that are being collected by the data.
So, why do companies or teams need to track assets or people in the first place? I mean, what's the benefit, when you know where a person or a device or a thing is located?
Wow, there's really lots of reasons and lots of use cases. Most of these use cases can be extrapolated across verticals, right? So you may hear something that's really cool and it's a healthcare use case, but it doesn't mean that same use case doesn't work across, many verticals, right? So some of the key things, right, that we're seeing people look for location services for and wanting to know where a person is or a device really comes down to, some improved operational efficiencies. Sometimes there's compliance reporting that can be automated because of knowing where that device is. There's dwell time and pathing information, right? When we talk dwell time, it's how long is somebody spent in a building or in a space or a zone. Pathing, how do people get around a facility? Looking for more efficient pathing methods. That comes up a lot in logistics, right? Pathing through a warehouse. There's also other things that we talk about, they're starting to get really important about people and knowing where they are is, located around safety and duress. And maybe integration with law enforcement in the event of an emergency or something like that. Obviously in retail, if you think about it, it's always employee and visitor experience. Knowing who the employee is, where they are, how to interact with them really is based on knowing where that person is. In warehousing and stuff, and especially also in healthcare, we see this thing called periodic replenishment. And it really is around knowing where equipment is, knowing what's available, knowing what's in maintenance and things like that. Real estate's another really big one, right? Hybrid work, how people are utilizing your space today versus how they utilized it pre-pandemic. So real estate's starting to get a really good traction there. As a result of the pandemic, contract tracing, knowing where people were, knowing who they were close to, once again, a pretty serious use case. some things that we really don't think about is things like staff retention and recruitment, right? As I talked earlier, if we look at automated compliance and reporting, that makes people's life easier. Safety and duress, right? It makes people feel safer. So there are things like that that can, by implementing location services, we can have improved staff retention and recruitment. The last really big one where we're starting to see a lot of traction is really around smart buildings and ESG initiatives, environmental, social, and governance. Really starting to tie the location of people to energy savings, right? Why have energy or power being utilized in areas where people just aren't working?
Yeah, well, it's come up already, but one area where we've done a lot of work in this space is in the healthcare industry. So why has healthcare been a leader with wireless location services?
Well, I think one of the biggest things with healthcare is more around, the criticality of the things that they have in their environment. Healthcare was an early adopter and they've been incubating these location technologies for, over a decade now, right? But if you think about the things that are within healthcare, asset tracking of critical devices such as infusion pumps or crash carts, or even, getting into things like infant abduction systems, knowing where those assets are and where they're located and how quickly they can be reached, and then really how many are on hand, right? So there's a lot there in healthcare. I've got some pretty good use cases we could discuss. One of the things with healthcare is when we talk about the periodic replenishment, wireless location services kind of works on zones, right? So an asset has the capability to inherit the attributes or the metadata assigned to a zone, right? So let's say an infusion pump is in a patient's room. The status of that infusion pump is now in use. So now they know that this equipment is in use. Or if it's in an area that has a property associated to it for maintenance, and that device is located in a maintenance area, they know it's under maintenance and they know that it's not available for use. Some of the other things, right, knowing where things are and how many are available. If it's in a queuing area, for example, it gets classified as available for use. And let's say there's 20 there, they have a mandatory requirement to have 15 always available. When it starts getting below that 15 count of available for use, they can start replenishment and making sure they have the right quantities on hand for the demand.
Well, so Mike, what other industries out there are gravitating toward this technology, and why are they doing that?
Well, I may have mentioned some of it before, but logistics is a really big one. And manufacturing are starting to become really big. We're starting to see things around autonomous ground vehicles or automated forklifts, things like that. Knowing where these are, being able to guide them around the facility in more of an autonomous way. Also operations managers in warehouse areas are starting to look at pathing data, of warehouse employees. They want to determine the most efficient routes. So, it improves that operational awareness, right? Then the same thing can be used really if we start wanting to talk worker safety, right? You have these autonomous vehicles moving around, but you have workers walking around. You really want to try to look at maybe trying to prevent, some collisions or something like that. Manufacturing is starting to get pretty big too. We have conversations around kitting, right? A bin has 15 parts in it, or a tool rack has 5 tools. We kind of look at a different location technology there. It's called RFID, but we'll see some other technologies that are starting to fulfill this as well. I'm going to give you a pretty good story here. I live in Phoenix, and there was recently a thing on the news about an F-35 fighter jet, right? It was in maintenance. This fighter jet engine was under maintenance. It cost $14 million. It got damaged beyond repair because a worker left a flashlight in the engine. So one of the use cases that we have in manufacturing is to make sure that things are returned to a central location prior to any testing and turn up, right? So we are able to look at a tool rack. We're able to say, okay, this tool rack is supposed to have 15 pieces or 100 pieces. And if a piece is missing, we can send out an alert. We can set visual notifications such as flashing lights, right? Saying that something is missing. And if they had technology like this, potentially we could have prevented that situation. And I'll talk a little bit about ROI being a problem. I think that, $14 million engine being damaged, ROI is pretty simple here to prove, so.
Well, Mike, as organizations adopt wireless location services, are there any misconceptions or common pitfalls technology leaders should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, there's a lot. You really need to kind of understand the accuracy requirement and how that accuracy data is being obtained. And then you also need to kind of understand the data. One of the biggest pitfalls is people have existing wireless designs, and they want to start doing location services, but it's not conducive to good high-level location accuracy. So wireless location services are really foundational, right? You almost have to design for it ahead of time, and it goes above and beyond traditional, end user access, for example, right? So if you start thinking about the use cases and accuracy requirements, the smaller the room, obviously, that you're trying to get analytics out of, the higher level of the accuracy you need to have, right? And there's certainly many ways that we can do it, but it may require more physical devices, such as APs or additional BLE beacons or things like infrared, right? Real-time location services are not necessarily real-time. A lot of this stuff is historical data, right? If you think about retail and we want to compare day over year over year or day over day, things like comparing Valentine's Day versus in 2020 versus Valentine's Day in 2024, or comparing an event, right? Being able to go back and look at those events month over month. We really got to start looking at how we archive that data, right? Which is can be pretty big when you're looking at years and years worth of data. Mm-hmm. Another thing I think is a pretty big myth is, you don't have to look at this persuasively throughout your entire enterprise. You can start small. Really, you can, some companies may only care about building occupancy, meaning footfall traffic in and out of a building. You may even be able to look at just a few conference rooms and how they're being used for hybrid work situations. Or in, retail or branch banking, right? Maybe only look at a few branches, figure out how they're being used and what data you can get. One of the other things is, I don't know that it's a myth, but wireless location services are complex, expensive. Like, as I mentioned, sometimes they're really difficult to prove ROI, excuse me. But if you understand the data that's being collected, and really kind of start small, you'll probably start getting the outcomes that you want. I guess the myth there might be it's, wireless location solutions are easy to install. I don't want to overwhelm anybody, but it can be relatively complex depending on how granular your use case is.
Well, Mike, how should line of business and technology stakeholders partner on this, and why is that partnership important in the first place?
That's a really, really good question. There's three facets there, right? We got line of business, which, from my perspective, that's going to be an IT department, or it's going to be, not necessarily IT, that's going to be your technology stakeholder, but line of business is going to be facilities, real estate, those types of areas. So we typically don't see IT departments seeking out location services. All my conversations with IT guys is they don't want to do this. They don't want to add it to their daily tasks. It's always almost driven from a line of business. And the line of business is typically, it's not typically in an IT budget. So unless the line of businesses are driving it, there's usually not a budget for it. I think in the long run, the more the lines of business are involved with the technology and involved with the outcomes and involved with the use cases, you're going to start seeing the data become more valuable to those lines of businesses because they have more ownership in it. And I also think that, the care and feeding and all of that really needs to be part of the business unit and maybe less IT. I know it's going to take a while for probably that to happen, but, and then from the partnerships perspective, looking at outside people such as WWT, we've got experience across multiple verticals implementing some of this technology. We also have a Building 60 on our ATC, and we have several of these different technologies proved out, working, collecting data, and using some of this data internally to drive some of our own decisions.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, Mike, last question for you. How do you see wireless location services evolving over the next few years? Where are we headed with these?
Wow, there's a lot there. Traditionally in wireless, we're already seeing a lot of AI and ML. And that's been traditionally more around troubleshooting and telemetry. But I think you're going to start seeing the data sets are huge, right? And it's not just information coming from wireless location services. I mean, lots of organizations already have this data, right? If you think about large public venues, concerts, ticket sales, right? They already know how many people are in their building, right? Retail, they already know, how much food they're selling or how many clothes they're selling. It's just kind of correlating that to occupancy data. I think another thing you're going to kind of see is some things around private cellular. Traditionally the service providers have maintained that data, but with private cellular, you're being able to maintain and work on and operationalize your own data. So I think you'll start seeing a lot of stuff with private cellular around location. Some of the other things, visualization of data from multiple sources, right? It's not just one platform. It's not one source of data collector, but being able to visualize that data more easily, I think is kind of still lacking a little bit in the industry. Some OEMs do it really well. Some need a little bit of help. Query-based interfaces, I think, is another big thing. We have one data set, and business units all use the same data set, but they're looking for different information out of the same data. So I think being able to build those custom interfaces specific to a business unit and get relatively granular with it is probably something you're going to see. From an accuracy perspective, I think that, they're focusing on things that bring increased location and accuracy. Today, with typical wireless trilateration, the ability of a client or an end device to see 3 or more access points in 2 or 3D, meaning multiple floors, we're really only getting 3 to 15 meters worth of accuracy. And that really, like I said, is based on a foundational design to get down to that 3-meter world. When we do a design at Worldwide, we really try to target that 3 to 5 meter. We're also seeing, some things with Bluetooth low energy having a little bit better accuracy. We can get to almost 100% in-room certainty with the right design. I think the biggest trend we're going to see is around what's called ultra wideband or UWB. We're starting to see use cases that require precise location data, low power consumption on these devices. People want to get 4 to 5 years worth of battery life out of these tags, meaning, staff badges or asset tags, et cetera. These things have batteries in them. High transfer rates and very low latency calculations, right? All is starting to be really important on these real-time use cases. Now, get a little bit more about ultra wideband is that these OEMs are claiming a 10 centimeter accuracy. And if you start thinking about how accurate that is and how granular you can get with the use case, we're going to see lots of other verticals moving in and adopting location services. And, we're going to see some very, very cool use cases being solved for.
Yeah, well, those all sound quite interesting, Mike. And clearly, you have deep expertise on all this wireless location services. Appreciate you being with us here today to share your expertise. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Matt. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, and thank you for coming as well. Another great expert session. We've got new ones coming up all the time, whether it's experts or some of our other virtual events. Invite you to check those out. They're out on wwt.com/events. A deep back catalog as well. We invite you to watch on demand at any time. And if you got any questions, any feedback, feel free to get in touch with me, Mike, others on our team. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for coming today, and we'll see you next time.